Today I'm going to teach you how to install one of the best smart thermostats on the market to make your heating more energy efficient and save you lots of money. And stay to the end of the video because I've got a big reveal for you guys of how you can get any electrician to give you an instant 20% discount if you're getting an electrician to install this for you. Before we get into the video, please show your support by hitting the like button and subscribing if you haven't done so already. So we got these lovely work mats we got from Stickers and that really kindly sent them to us, and they are perfect for kind of just protecting the floor when you're working on a particular area. So we're installing a Tado Smart Thermostat system today. It's on this dual zone system, so we've got a downstairs heating zone and an upstairs heating zone. It's a little bit more complicated than standard where you've only got one zone, but the idea is to be able to control your heating and hot water via an app and to be able to really have much more flexibility about how you use the heating and hot water. Now this is a new build property, so it's been built with fairly standard thermostats. We're going to upgrade them to much smarter ones. So let me show you what's involved and how this system, the existing system, works, and a few little tips to make sure you don't get stuck when you're installing a smart thermostat. So this is the wiring center actually attached to the side of the hot water tank. I'll get the cover off this and show you what's underneath using my lovely new Wera screwdrivers, which, if you're interested, I've done a video about on Tools for Sparks, my other YouTube channel, so I'll leave a link up here or a link in the description below where you can find out about these. So this is, believe it or not, a fairly nice, neat wiring center. I know you probably think it looks like a mess, but actually it's pretty decent because the cables have been clamped in nicely, and they've even identified them with different colours, which is absolutely lovely. So this red one you can see corresponds to this motorised valve here, the yellow cable corresponds to this motorised valve, and the blue one corresponds to this motorised valve over here. So it makes it a lot easier for us to identify and know what we're working with. Also, they've actually put some writing on these cables, B, D and U by the looks of it, so that will help us to figure out what these control cables do. The first thing we've got to really do with a smart thermostat install is identify what kind of system we're working with, what kind of heating system we're working with, and then we can follow the wiring diagram that the installation manual gives us in order to know how to connect this thermostat with this particular type of heating system. So one of the first things I always recommend doing is take photos of everything before you start disconnecting stuff or changing stuff, just in case you get stuck halfway through and you're like, oh, like which way around did they have these wires, and you just get confused. So take a really good close-up photo of the wiring center, boom, like that, and do the same with the thermostats. When you get the covers off, I'll show you the two thermostats that we've got in place already, which are wired thermostats. Once you've done that, you've got those records, then you're safe to start sort of changing things around. Another thing to be really careful of as well before you start is obviously to isolate the power. But before you do isolate the power, one thing I would say to do, really important again, is just check to make sure that the existing system is actually working properly. Especially if you're an electrician and you're doing this, there's nothing worse than rocking up at the customer's house, doing the whole job, and then finding out that actually there was a problem with the existing system and it was never working properly in the first place. So this is the current setup. We've got these fairly rudimentary thermostats, and I believe that you just do this to turn the temperature up. So what we're going to do is ramp it right up. It's already a hot day, it's like 25 degrees, but you can see now we've put it on 28 degrees. It's cooling for heat, so what I need to do now is verify that the valve opens, the pump kicks in, boiler kicks in, and it starts to heat up these rooms upstairs, and then we'll do the same for downstairs. So I can hear now that the pump has kicked in. I can actually feel hot water running through that pump, and I can see that one of these valves should be open. Yeah, this valve, the yellow valve here, is actually open. So we know that this valve is for the upstairs heating zone. It's the yellow valve which corresponds to this zone valve cable here. Now we'll turn that thermostat off, make sure everything shuts down properly, and then we'll do the same for the downstairs zone. So just bobbing this off now. And we'll just listen to see if it shuts off. So now there's no noise from the pump at all, so the pump is not active and it's not vibrating or anything. And I can check this valve now. valve has now closed. So to know whether a motorized valve is open or closed, it's very simple. You flick the switch to the left. If you've got resistance there in the middle, that means it's closed. If it goes all the way across, then that means it's open. And you probably saw earlier, but I'll show you on the next one, how when the system was working, I could literally just flick that right across, so the valve was open. I'll show you that on this one when we do the downstairs zone. Can't remember where it was now. Yeah, it's in here. So now this valve, as you can see, I can flick that switch completely open. There's no resistance on it. So that means this is the downstairs heating valve, and this pump, I can hear it's kicked in again. I'll put the mic next to it so you can hear what it sounds like. So we've now verified both the upstairs and downstairs zones that they work properly. We're going to check the hot water one now and just make sure that that hot water valve opens correctly when we're calling for hot water, and then that's the whole system verified. Now this is a new build property, very unlikely that the system wouldn't be working properly, but if we don't check, then we could end up in trouble. So it's just good standard practice to always check the existing system first before you start doing alterations. 1 hour, boom. Right, so that's the hot water activated on boost. Right, now the valve hasn't actually opened for the hot water, but I think that's probably because the cylinder is actually already full of hot water, and there will be a cylinder thermostat that measures the temperature of the hot water, and if it's already above that, it will click off even if it's on boost. So what we need to do is just take the cover off here, and we can probably access the cylinder thermostat here and just up the temperature on it. So these are our, this is where our cylinder stats are, and there are two, but only one's in use. The left one is in use, and that is basically switching the boiler on. So if we turn the temperature now down on that, you can hear the valve cuts out and the pump stops, because it basically says the hot water in the tank is above the level that we've set the thermostat at. Now why do we have two of these? Is because this one is actually for when you've got the immersion heater hardwired. So this is the immersion heater, which is basically an electrical element that will heat the water directly instead of using the heat from the boiler to heat the hot water. But as you can see from these terminals, they're actually empty. There's no cable going in here. So although they've put a switch on the wall here for an immersion heater, they've never actually hardwired it into the immersion heater element. It's not in use, it's only running off the boiler at the moment. But it's good to know that they have that option, because for example they do have solar, so we could put a solar energy diverter in here and connect that so that the hot water is actually heated by electricity rather than gas when they've got extra solar energy. And if you want to see a video about that, I'll leave a link in the description where you can see how a solar energy diverter works to heat the hot water. It's quite clever. Now that we've verified that the existing system, both the zones of heating and the hot water work, we'll just turn this off boost, and now we'll take the cover off this thermostat and see what the wiring's like inside. So you can see we've got various control wires in here. We've got live and neutral in, and then we've got common and normally open 1. We've got normally closed 2 and normally open 2. So the live and neutral in is literally just to power the thermostat, then common should be a permanently live, and then normally open 1 I would imagine is for heating, and then these two I would imagine are for the hot water. So normally closed 2 essentially comes down from the thermostat on the tank, and when the tank is calling for heat, it powers up this wire, comes across, and then essentially if the thermostat is calling for a boost, it will send the power up, open the valve, activate the pump, and the boiler will kick in. So what we're going to do again is just take a picture of all of this, and we've got a record of the make and model of the existing thermostat. We can check the wiring diagram of that just to make sure that we know exactly what wires do what before we start swapping over to the Tado system. So how this works is quite a clever system. You've got these pins on the back, and those pins just slot into the holes on this terminal block so that it makes contact, and it means there's no actual wiring connecting between here and here. It all just works via the pins. So for you learners out there, what would you expect to find behind this thermostat? Would there be as many wires as the one downstairs, or will it be slightly different? Let's take off the cover and have a look. As I expected, we've only got actually 2 wires in here. We've got common and normally open. So this is basically just acting like a switch to call for heat or not call for heat. That means that this unit is probably self-powered, and actually you can see there that it is because it's got batteries inside. So the batteries do the power, and then this is literally just like a switch. So when this thermostat calls for heat, it makes contact between the common terminal and normally open. It basically goes and closes those, makes a bridge across them, and that sends power over to the motorized valve. It will open the motorized valve, activate the pump, and the boiler will kick in and send hot water down the upstairs pipes. So this is our Tado Smart Thermostat starter kit. We've also got a Tado wired Smart Thermostat add-on for additional rooms, so that will do the upstairs zone. This will do the downstairs, which does heating and hot water. We've got one more box, which I think will be, yeah, the wireless receiver for the hot water control. So we're actually going to put the receiver for the hot water in here. The way that Tado works, you don't have the option for having the hot water and heating done from one of these in a room. So hopefully that makes sense. Now the question is, how do we know what type of heating system this is? Let me know in the comments what you think from what we've seen so far. Is it a Y-plan, something else? Let me know what type of heating system you think it is. What we're going to try to do is just talk you through how to find out what type of system it is using the manual for the Tado thermostat. So you'll see here in the box you have an installation guide, which is more about how you connect everything to the app and stuff, and then there's this manual for professional installers, which is the kind of guide to actually how to wire the thing up. And it does come in multiple languages. Handleiding for professionele installateurs, that's Dutch. Manuel pour installateurs professionnels, that's French. Manuel para installadores profesionales, Español. Manuale per installatori professionalisti, Italiano. Anleitung für Fachinstallateure, Deutsch. We're going to follow the English one just to make our lives easier, and it does say that we need to install the internet bridge first, pair everything up, and then mount it. That's really important because it's a lot more difficult to pair everything up once it's mounted. The reason is when everything's far apart, it takes longer to sync up, so it's better if you can sync everything up when it's close together. So we're going to plug the internet bridge in now and just pair that up with the 2 thermostats and the wireless receiver, and then hopefully once that's all paired up, it'll be a fairly simple installation process. So now that's paired up and all added to the app. So this is the wireless receiver, which kind of acts like a wiring center, and it's what we're going to use just to control the hot water. And then the other 2 thermostats that are wired will actually control the heating. So what I'm going to do now is, now that these are registered to the app, I'm actually going to label them up as well, just so that I know which one's which. So I'm just covering the QR codes on these, but each device comes with a little sticker that you can peel off and then stick onto this card, and then you can put a label next to each one or just write down which room it does, so that you know later on, and you've got a record of the serial numbers of each device and which location that device is in. And so if anything comes unpaired or anything like that later, you've got this record and you can easily repair stuff. So Lee and Ruben were actually here a month ago doing an EV charging point installation here. We did a zappy, and I'm just going to take the board cover off, have a little look at how they've connected the EV circuit, and we'll do the whole neat or not neat on this new build house consumer unit. It's a bit tight and I'm like, I don't want to turn any power off. Oh no. It's not that bad actually, to be fair, for a new build. I've seen a lot worse. I would give it probably a 6 out of 10. Obviously the work that our guys have done is nice and neat. So you've got this cable here for the Zappy car charger. They've put a CT clamp on the solar as well. Obviously they've had to pull that out slightly to make room for it because of the way these cables have been brought so far in. There's also a CT clamp for the main tail. This is my bugbear on consumer units, people using this 4mm sleeving. You could use 2mm sleeving on this and it would look much neater. And they've brought the sheaths of the cables all the way in too far, so that there's this whole bunch of cables really tight here. There's not much room to maneuver. Just a dual RCD consumer unit, which we would never fit ourselves. We'd always do all RCBOs, but they do have a surge protection device at least, and they do have type A RCDs, which is fairly good. Does at least comply with the modern regulations. Right, so boiler circuit is going off. So this is the point where we do safe isolation to make sure that the circuit is dead before we start working on it. And to do that, we're just going to isolate this boiler circuit here. We're going to test to make sure that it's dead at the other end. So safety is really important when working around electrics. We have this voltage measuring device, it's a voltage indicator, and we can test to make sure it's working correctly by using this proving unit. Now, if you're a DIYer, you're not going to want to spend 150 quid on a proving unit. You can test on a known supply, so whatever that might be, you know, you want to basically test on something that you know is live first to make sure that your tester is working, and then you turn the circuit off, and then you'll test to make sure it's all dead, and then you need to test your tester again on a known supply. So then you do that again, you test your tester again at the end just to make sure that the tester hasn't broken during the process. And to know if it's live or not, we just need to test all combinations really. So I'm going to go on all of these different terminals and just check to make sure they're all dead. Probably the easiest way in this situation is to test to earth, because that'll give me a good indication, but I'll test in neutral as well. Everything is dead, which is good to see. Now, every electrician probably has some kind of horror story of the worst electric shock they've ever had, because let's be brutally honest, although, you know, we're supposed to do this every time, you know, it's really important, sometimes you might get a bit complacent and not do it. The worst one for me, I'll tell you about. It's a bit embarrassing, to be honest. I was an apprentice. I think I was just finishing my apprenticeship, or I was just qualified, and I was working up in somebody's loft, but it was like a loft hatch just in the roof space above their kitchen. So the customer was sitting in the kitchen having a cup of coffee or anything. I was up in the loft space and I was doing some alterations to the lighting. I think I was putting a new light. I opened up this junction box to connect the wire in for the new light, and of course I turned the circuit off that I thought it was, but I hadn't actually checked to make sure it was dead. And the circuit I had turned off was not the circuit that I was working on right then. So I touched this junction box and it gave me a massive shock, and I just remember screaming out loud. Like it wasn't a high pitched scream, but it was more of a yelp, you know, like a really loud oh, like that. And the customer was like, "You all right? What's going on?" And I was like, "Oh, it's fine, it's just a spider." And I kind of got away with, you know, not worrying the customer too much that I was an incompetent electrician. But it hurts, you know, when you get a really bad shock like that, it hurts. And the thing is that it makes, if you touch something like that, it actually, your muscles in your arm contract and it makes you grip onto stuff. So if you're touching a wire and it's live, you will actually grip onto it. Your muscle spasming will make you grip onto it, and that can make the shock even worse. So what John does, he's like an old school electrician, if he's ever touching something to check, you know, he's turned it off, he's done safe isolation or anything, but the final check is he actually touches his hand against it, but like that, so that if his hand contracts, it goes this way and he doesn't grip onto the wire. That's kind of an old school method, but the lesson, guys, is really always test your tester and prove that it's dead before you start working on it. And DIY people, stuff like this you can do yourself. You're allowed to do this kind of DIY, but just make sure you do it safely. So now that we know this is dead, we can go and change over our first thermostat. So we've just double checked to make sure all these are dead, so that's fine. Now we're gonna just fit the heating thermostat on here. So we're probably only gonna be using these 2 terminals. These 4 wires, we'll blank them off in Wago connectors, just so that they're in the back box. They're ready to use if anyone wanted to change things in the future. And we are gonna check in our manual for the previous thermostat, just to make sure we know which wire does which for the hot water, because at the other end, we're gonna actually disconnect those wires and rewire them into the hot water controller, which is actually going to go in the airing cupboard. So the wonders of the internet, I'm able to find the manual for this. And while we're talking about the wonders of the internet, have you learned about the wonders of becoming an Artisan Electrics channel member yet? I want to give a massive shout out to our latest Pringles for Life member, Marquez. He's joined up on our highest tier membership, which really supports our channel. So thank you, Marquez. And if you want to find out more about what membership does and the benefits that you'll get, click the join button next to subscribe to find out more. The heating is common and normally open 1. Mains power comes in the N and L terminals, neutral and line, and then NC2 and NO2 are the hot water terminals. So what we want to do is actually disconnect the wires from these 4 terminals and just check the numbering on those wires, because these wires actually have numbers on, so that we know which wires they correspond to at the other end, and we can disconnect them at the other end and reconfigure them. So you can see the number here on the wire, so that's the number 6. I've actually taken a picture of the diagram, so what I'm going to do is do the little markup feature, and I'm just going to write next to here 6, so I know that that was wire number 6. Then I'll do the same with each wire, and then we know exactly which one's which at the other end. So I've numbered them all up here according to the numbers on the wires. That means I could disconnect them all. And now I'm going to take this face plate off and we'll show you what's behind. It's quite interesting how they wired this actually. So this, dear friends, is what we call an architrave box, which is a very small back box. And I think it's a really clever idea that they've used this to put the wiring in for the smart thermostat, because it just gives a little bit of room behind to hide any connections and things. And the great thing about that now is that we can use that same box, hide the wires behind that we don't need, and then use the wires that we do need. And the screws are the standard width, so they line up with the holes, so we can swap that over. We don't have to drill any fixing holes or anything like that, so it makes our installation life a lot easier, which is really nice. So just thread these 2 wires that we are going to use now through the back plate, and then line up these screws which came with the original thermostat. Attention to detail is important, so it's nice to get it level, otherwise it's always going to bug you. Now these wires are what we call fine stranded copper flex, and they can be quite difficult to terminate into these small terminals, because when you push the wire in, it kind of gets all smushed up and the wires tend to fray. So what we like to do is put these on. These are called bootlace ferrules, and they basically go over the wire and they hold all the cores together. Then you crimp it on and it gives you a really nice connection and keeps everything together. It's a little bit extra maybe, but it's a nice thing to do. So in order to fix these on, I'm just going to cut the ends off, strip them back the right distance. And then we use this special crimping tool called a ferrule crimper, and it makes a lovely clicky sound. So now we need to connect only the 2 terminals that we're going to use, which is the common and normally open. Common was wire number 4 from the previous setup, so we'll put that in there. And that's maybe a little bit long, so what I'll do is just cut that down so that it's slightly shorter. And that fits perfectly. This one goes in normally open. And the reason it's called normally open is exactly what it says on the tin. It's normally an open contact. There's no connection between this one and that one. So now that both wires are connected, we can put this cover on. And then all we need to do is pop the cover on, except I've taken the wrong cover. This is why it's good to label these like this, because if I hadn't, I would get confused between which one is the upstairs and which one is the living room. Because I labelled them, I know that this one goes with this base. That just clicks on, and then that's all nice and solid. Now to do the upstairs one. So for those of you who are our regular channel viewers, you might remember there used to be this guy who worked for us called Cory. The funny thing is, since he's left, I keep discovering things that are wrong with the van. This is the caddy, right? He only had it for like 2 weeks before he left. In those 2 weeks, the front of the van got dented somehow. He said somebody attacked it with a hammer. Nobody will ever know what truly happened. The other thing though is that the windscreen's cracked all the way along the bottom of the windscreen. I've got the dent on the front fixed now, but when the guy brought it back from fixing the dent, the hammer attack on the front, he told me that the front grille is also damaged, and I hadn't noticed. Somebody hit it, like hit a pheasant or something in the van as well. So Cory, if you're out there, I hope that now you're using your own van, that you look after it better. It's cracked all the way along here, all the way along to here. Basically the whole width of the windscreen, which is slightly irritating. The hammer dent was here somewhere and it was like this. We might have a shot of it somewhere in one of the other videos, but I found this amazing guy who repaired it for 150 quid. He said to me when he gave it back to me, "Oh, did you know your front grille is broken? That one, that one, that one, and that one, all broken." And this is such a lovely front grille. I mean, it's a bad design from VW because that is so fragile, but it does look really beautiful. So again, I'm slightly at a loss as to what to do now, because that is not going to be easy to repair. This is a lovely van, I must admit. It's absolutely beautiful. Lovely to drive, it's automatic and everything like that. The only issue with it is that it's too small really for what we do. For somebody who's doing like small works, fault finding, testing, inspection, things like that, it's perfect. But whenever you need a lot of materials, which we do sometimes, it does get tight for space in the back. So I'm actually thinking about selling this and maybe just leasing a larger van instead. So if you are interested in buying this, get in touch, because if I can get a good price for it, I will probably sell it. Right, heading upstairs. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on this one because it's basically just copy paste from downstairs, except it's even easier because there's just literally 2 wires. So we'll just get it off, get it all ferruled up, put the new one on, Bob's your uncle. So that's the upstairs one, wired up, cover on. I'm just going to click the cover on, and now we can go and do the hot water controller. So now what we've got to do is find those 4 wires that were going down to the thermostat on the ground floor in the living room, which we know the numbers of, and then find which terminals they're connected to here. Once we know that, we can reconfigure the wiring in here and run a new cable, a new flex cable, over to this, which we're going to mount on the wall there, run that in, and then this will do the controls for the hot water. So I figured out which of these cables is which now. The B is for boiler, that's logical. D is for downstairs, U is for upstairs. So what we're trying to find now is the wires from this downstairs thermostat, which one's doing the normally open for the hot water, and then we can wire that into this. So essentially we're going to need 4 wires running to this. We're going to need live and neutral to power it up, and then these hot water terminals we're going to have common and normally open. So we actually only need basically a 4-core flex. We've got 5-core, so we can connect the earth in to the earth terminal as well. And we can just mount that probably on the wall here, although actually we might be able to, yeah, we still probably could fit it here actually. So essentially in these controllers, you have these 3 terminals in the middle here. This one is the live, so that's permanent live. Then these 3 are neutral, and they're bridged out underneath there. So the neutral is shared across those 3. And then these 3 are the earth or CPC, circuit protective conductors. So what we have to do first is take out 1 and 2 from our thermostat wire downstairs, because obviously we don't want power going down to there. And then we will connect our live and neutral for our new heating controller into these 2 terminals. So we're going to need to put a bridge in between the permanent live and the common of the hot water, and Tado provide these little bridging wires, which is really nice. So if we just bend these ends up, that should pretty much fit straight across. I always like to put the bridge in first, because then you can do all the other wiring around it, and it's important to not forget the bridge, because if you do forget it, as I did in a previous video, which I will leave a link to in the description, where we did a Tado install at Lee's house, I forgot the bridge, and so the whole thing didn't work at the start, and Lee actually pointed it out to me that I'd forgotten to put that little wiring bridge in. So the reason we do this bridge is because you need to have permanent power to the common terminal, which can then switch between the normally closed and normally open terminals. So it will send power then from this through the device out to the normally closed terminal all the time, and then when heat is called for, it'll switch across and it'll give power to the normally open, and there won't be any power normally closed, and those signals are important to actually tell the system to be able to call for hot water. Obviously a lot of this is fairly simple for me as a qualified electrician, because I do it all the time, but if you're doing this at home and it's the first time doing it and you're kind of like, you get a bit stuck or something, we've actually got this amazing Discord server where there's loads of people in there, electricians and DIYers, who follow our channel, and it's a place where you can just discuss things, ask questions, etc. It's completely free to join, so there's a link in the description where you can sign up for our Discord. There's over 1,000 members on there already, and it's just a great community where we can talk about electrics of varying varieties. So we've used the blue and brown as neutral and line. Obviously those are the correct colours for those conductors. We've used the black as the normally closed, the grey as the normally open. They are the colours identified as live conductors anyway, so that's fine. And then the green and yellow is the earth conductor, or CPC, circuit protective conductor. So before we screw it to the wall, I just want to measure, you know, and sort of, I call it offer it up, just put it on the wall roughly to see what it's going to look like, where it will fit. I think there it will look good, it will fit perfectly there. We're going to just leave the flex long enough to come up into this, probably come in the bottom, that's better, and then through that cord grip, and then leave the cable long enough to go to these sort of furthest terminals. There's plenty of room, so we can lose a bit of slack in here anyway. So we'll cut the cable there and we'll strip it back there. So this is our tool of the day today. This is the Nipex Ergo Strip. It's one of my favourite tools for stripping flexible cables. You just swizzle it around and just pull, and it strips the cable without nicking into the outer sheath, which is really important. You can even use it to strip the little end wires, because you've got little different size bits there that you can use to strip the ends. So if I want to, for example, just use that to strip the flex like that. You can use it to strip data cables as well. You've got a smaller one on this end, and it locks closed like that. It's just an absolutely brilliant tool. I absolutely love it. Link in the description where you can get this for a really good price. Now, it's really important when you're doing this to actually get the cable properly secured in the cord grip. So you want to loosen it off just enough to get it underneath, and then wiggle it in like that. Leave it, you know, a decent amount in so that it doesn't pull out easily enough, and then tighten that cord grip. And what that does is just stops it from pulling out, so that you never get any exposed single insulated conductors, because that could be dangerous. So that's all secured in the cord grip now, and then I can terminate my wires into the various terminals in here. So we'll start by connecting the earth or circuit protective conductor. So I'm just going to go with this bottom one because it's not got many conductors in it. It's always difficult if you're trying to jam it in, say up in that one, it would be really tough. But because we've got space in this one, I'm just going to pop it in under here, and that does actually work. Just be really careful when you terminate this. Give it a little tug to make sure it's in properly, and also tug the other wire to just make sure that you've not let the other wire come loose. That's absolutely fine, they're both nice and tight in there. We'll tidy these up a little bit before we close the cover, but for the moment we'll just leave it like that. And then we'll do the live and neutral. I'm going to strip all of these actually first, it's just easier and quicker to do that sometimes. All about efficiency. So just terminating the live conductor in now. It is a bit tricky when you've got other conductors in there, like these two, which are twisted together already. Make sure you get a proper solid connection, that's the most important thing. So give those 3 a tug. They're all in securely. Now we'll do our neutral. Sometimes good to loosen them off so that it gives you more space in the terminal. Voila, give those a tug, all good. Now that just leaves us with these two. So the black is the normally closed, which we said was number 6. So if we look at our wires, number 6 is this one. So we're literally just gonna disconnect number 6 from here, which is from that flex cable that went down to that thermostat on the wall downstairs. Cut the end off that one. Ooh, and yeah, so this is why it's really important that you've taken photos earlier, because I've pulled that out now and I'm like, oh, was it in this one? I think it was in this one, but I'm not 100% sure. So what I can do is just go back to the photo that I took of the wiring center, and I can see that there was a black wire in there. So you've got the one that's bridged out, there was a black wire, now there's not. So I know that that's the one that I've just pulled that out of. So I'll clip the end off there, and then I'll wire my new black into here, and that just gives me the reassurance that I have actually got it in the right terminal. So number 3 was the normally open. Again, we'll cut the end off that one and pull that out, and then we're going to pop that in. Now I'm going to probably do it on this side because it was going in that side, but I don't like having outgoing wires on this bridge side, so I'm just going to pop it in there instead. So these are 4 wires that we no longer need from our flex cable, so I'm literally just going to wrap those up in a bit of tape because we don't have room to put them in connectors really at this end, and you know, they are disconnected at both ends, but at least we know they're there in case of any need for future. We'll just tuck them behind there, and then these ones we'll just tidy everything up now, try and loop them in as neatly as we can, and the most important thing is to make sure that they're not crossing over like that when you put the cover on, because you don't want to crush the wires when you put the cover on. So it's just good to make sure that they're all sort of looped as neatly as you can inside. Any slack is sort of fairly neatly looped inside and pressed down before you put the cover on. This system is actually an S-plan system. I spoke about Y-plan earlier, and I'll tell you what the difference is. So a Y-plan system has a 3-port valve, so you've got the hot water comes in, and then it will either go to the heating direction only, hot water only, or both. An S-plan system, if you think of S, think of single. It basically has a single valve for each of the zones of heating. So you've got a 2-port valve for the hot water, 1 2-port valve for the heating, and if you've got 2 zones like we've got here, then you've got another valve for the other zone of heating, for example. So that's S-plan, just think of single valves that do each zone of heating. Essentially, that's how I remember it, and they are wired up differently. Now I'm not going to go into too much depth on the difference between wiring these different types of systems, but there are some great resources out there, and I'll leave a link to eFix's page where they have some information about the different types of wiring systems. Also, John Ward has some brilliant diagrams on his website as well, so I'll leave a link for that as well. So I just need a couple of short wood screws to screw this to the wall now. And then once that's done, I'm actually going to leave all the covers off, power it up, just to make sure everything's working properly, and then I'll put all the covers finally on before we go. Now, what do you do with the old thermostats? You've got a few choices. You could throw them away, you could keep them here at the property, and then if you ever moved out and you wanted to take your smart thermostats with you, you could swap everything back. Might be a bit faffy though, or you could stick them on eBay or something and sell them, and at least somebody else might be able to use them. I would definitely recommend trying to recycle them if you can, but if you're in sort of like a rented property, for example, and you know that your landlord will want you to put these old ones back, make sure you put them in a safe place. Now I'm just clearing up, and I found this in the box. I forgot to say about this. So Tado do supply this, which you could use to wire up the hot water controller. It's basically the same as me using the 5-core flex, except I've got the earth in there as well, but this is fine to use if you don't want to buy a 5-core flex, just use this. One little thing, take photos of after you've connected the new connections as well, so that if there's ever any issues in future and you're not here, you could always look back at the photos and kind of talk through it in your mind and see if you can figure out what the problem might be. So now's the moment of truth where we turn the power back on and see if it will go bang or not. It's not going to go bang, but we want to make sure that the new system is working as it should work. So flick the circuit breaker back on. It did make a funny noise. That'd be so bad if it actually did go bang. Yeah, that seems to be working. So we'll check upstairs just to make sure it all looks okay. We'll manually engage one of these. We'll just put the temperature up to like, oh, actually it doesn't let you go above 25, which is interesting. So there might be an app limit for these. Oh, here we go. Just heard it click in. So heating should be clicking in upstairs now. So now that this is in place, I've turned the thermostat on downstairs, but actually it's not probably syncing with this yet properly, because we need to, now it's powered up, we need to make sure it's connected to the customer's app properly. Now he's in a meeting currently, so we'll give him a few minutes, but we'll just test the hot water now and the heating by pressing this. So this will do, actually no, this is only doing the hot water. So if we press that, we should hear the hot water start to kick in. Yeah, there we go. So our valve now has opened for the hot water and the pump has kicked in, which means that the tank will start to fill with hot water. So that's great. We can just turn that off and that will valve close straight away. So that's absolutely perfect. For the heating, we're going to need to make sure that this is connected properly in the app, and then we should be able to turn the thermostats up and down and hear these valves open in the heating zone to kick in. It's 25.3 degrees in here, and the limit on the thermostat is 25 degrees. So we're going to have to, I don't know if there's like a manual override to test it or something, because there must be a way to test it on a super hot day like this. So everything appears to be working. We had a little bit of a trouble connecting the wireless bridge, the wireless receiver to the system. It was saying not connected for some reason, so we're going to have to do a little bit of troubleshooting on that to find out what's going on. But an interesting addition to the system are these radiator valves, which actually the customer has bought a load for himself, and he's going to fit them because they're super easy to install on any radiators that have already got thermostatic radiator valves. They come with all the kit that you can use to fix and mount them, and it means that you can control every individual radiator separately. We have done another video on that, and I'll leave a link as the pinned comment so that you can watch that video afterwards and see how these are actually paired up and how they work. But for those of you who stayed to the end of the video, I wanted to share with you this final interesting point, which is I've recently discovered that smart thermostats come under the government's new energy saving equipment installation scheme, whereby you can get 0% VAT on any energy saving measures that you have installed in your home. So most commonly people know that that applies to solar panel installation. So you will get charged 0% VAT on solar panel installation because it helps you to save energy and stuff. But a little known fact is that smart thermostat installation also comes under that. So if your electrician who you ask to do this is VAT registered, he can do the install under that scheme and charge you 0% VAT. And if you're an electrician and you're wondering how that all works, basically you still have to pay the VAT on the materials, but you charge 0% VAT to the customer, and then you reclaim that 20% VAT when you do a VAT return. So a little bit complicated, but essentially for customers who find themselves thinking after this video, oh my goodness, this is a bit too complicated, I can't do it myself, and you want to get an electrician to do it, just ask him, can you apply 0% VAT on this installation? And that essentially will save you 20%, which is what we're doing for this customer today. So I hope that is very helpful and hope you found this video enjoyable and interesting in some way. After this video, there'll be another video that will pop up all about how to install Ring Video Doorbell Pro. So if you're interested in that, why not grab a cup of tea and watch the next video too. Maybe another video after that, because we've got nearly 500 videos on here all about electrician life installing interesting tech. So we hope that you'll subscribe and join us for the ride. Thank you for watching and have a great day.